welcome to this fantastic session. I have the great pleasure to actually introduce our speaker, Linda, who has her PhD from Resale University, and she's currently a postdoctoral researcher at Aalto University School for Business. I'm sure a lot of you might have read something from Linda before. She's published quite significantly, and she's done absolutely fantastic research. Personally, I'm a huge fan of her work, so it makes it even more of a privilege to be here today. She's also been granted the title of docent in economic sociology, especially in fashion and marketing research, and this is the equivalent of an adjunct professor at the University of Turku. Her research interest is about luxury and also second-hand and sustainability, as you can also see from her presentation. And she's done research in quite a lot of different contexts. So anything from luxury brands to perceived luxuriousness to second-hand vintage, fashion resale, and also sustainability, which clearly links quite nicely to the topic we are discussing today. She's been published in the various major leading journals, and she's also contributed various book chapters and authored a fantastic book, which is entitled The Interpretation of Luxury, Exploring the Consumer Perspective, which was with Palgrave as well. She's been doing secondhand research for nearly a decade, and she started exploring motivational drivers of luxury and secondhand buying, and she's also moved on to examining the customer and also seller of luxury goods and the relationship they have, and also has looked at the resale market. In a recent resale-related project, she is fascinated by the logic of the market, and she's examined the dynamics in leading to also change the market and consumers' role in shaping the market. And without further ado, I'm actually going to let Linda speak a little bit more. So welcome, Linda, and we're excited about your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you for a lovely introduction. I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah, it is great to have this opportunity to share my research and discuss more about this topic that I'm widely passionate about. And yes, my research and also this presentation today will relate to my research project concerning fashion resale and business models in this field. So as this project is still ongoing, I will share some preliminary findings and thought processes behind my topic. So today's agenda, I will have around half an hour or so before some questions, and we will be deep diving into the world of secondhand and booming resale market, especially in fashion and luxury field. So that is the context that I'm talking about today. And first, as an introduction, I will set the stage and describe a bit more this resale market as a whole. And then I will walk you through to the logic of resale market and point out some key actors who are relevant in this field. And finally, I will then discuss these preliminary observations of the resale strategies existing in the market, and then challenge the booming resale market through the lens of sustainability aspects. So yeah, let's get started. Yes, in the market, as well as in the academic literature, there are various terms used to refer goods that are previously used by other consumers. And many terms here in the field are very much overlapping. And there are also these kind of conceptual differences there as well. And in this context that I'm talking about today, I will use term secondhand, and I can regard that as more or less as an umbrella term. So secondhand goods, they are more like traditionally sold in channels which are not managed by the original company, so the company who has sold the brand new item here. So the resale market consists second-hand items, and also in that area there are also thrift as well as vintage, which can be positioned under the term second-hand. However, in this presentation I will discuss more or less only about the second-hand and resale, and not going detail to the vintage market or thrift consumption. So yes, let's start with looking more precisely about the size of the market. So second-hand in general, that's nothing new, I have to say, but the resale market has been growing a lot, as well as the desirability towards the previously used items during the last years, and it's assumed that it will be growing in the future years rapidly as well. ThredUp evaluated that resale market, excluding thrift, will be even reaching worth 40 billion euros by 2025. Of course, it's very challenging to estimate this market, because there's also buying and selling which is happening between the consumers. There's also happening these transactions exclusively only between the consumers, so no platforms or other companies involved. But the second-hand market, it has become more socially acceptable in the recent years, even fashionable, I would say. And this is, of course, very vital for the growth we can see today, today's resale market. And that's to be said, it requires also much more commitment from the consumer side. So it requires knowledge as well as time resources from consumer side. And besides the positive attitudes among consumers, there are also the new businesses and platforms and startups who are entering to the market and boosting this whole second cycle of the market. And the growth of the resale market, maybe it's kind of reflects the macro trends in general as well. And it tells very important stuff about society, people, and the time we are living in. And if I want to point out a few main drivers, macro level drivers here, that has enabled the growth, I would see that digitalization as well as sustainability are the key macro trends here. So digitalization, for example, online shopping platforms, social media has increased the easiness as well as desirability to buy and sell online. Sustainability discussion, the long life cycle of the product sets also a very trustworthy base for secondhand. However, of course, there are some challenges that I will tap into these sustainability challenges at the end of my presentation today. So the secondhand market is growing. It is super fascinating, and mainly the fascination from my side is because it is creating also new logic and engaging consumers in kind of new ways. So now moving on to the underlying resale logic. So because secondhand means that the product is previously used and owned, not bought as brand new, that means that there are various kinds of actors involved in this phenomena. It is valuable to observe the logic from product journey point of view. And here you can see the consumption cycle, which is suggested by Arnold and Thompson, 2005. That serves very good basis when we are making sense of how consumer is engaged with the product throughout the product's lifetime. And in very simplified way, we can say that we need, in order the second-hand market to exist, we need first the original company who produces the product and sells it to the first-hand customer, and then the first-hand customer buys it, uses, and then finally decides to sell or donate or pass the product further. And then we also need this other active consumer, so the buyer of secondhand goods, so the buyer who wants to buy previously used item. And in addition, there are now new alternative marketplaces in the platform who may ease this transaction between the consumer transactions. So today we are more interested in this kind of the pink arrow here. Yes. So let's move on. So yes, so secondhand market is very much dependent on the customer's actions. Secondhand market requires these two types of consumers. So basically, we need those who have possessed or bought the first-hand product, but then decides to sell. And then we need that other participant in the transaction, so the other consumer who actually wants to buy the previously used artifacts. And as I said earlier, the digitalization, social media, that can be seen to boost and accelerate the whole empowered consumers. And of course, these various third-party players, they have emerged to ease these transactions between the consumers. And as I said, there are many different marketplaces and platforms, and the extensive growth of new resale marketplaces that are specializing, especially in resale fashion, possibly even luxury goods, they have been steadily increased since 2010. So over the past 10 years, the growth has been growing rapidly. And in order to ease the secondhand transactions, the marketplaces, they need to operate two ways and two directions. So they serve both consumers and both customers. They serve the sellers who wants to get rid of their products, but then they need to also be appealing for those who are buying secondhand. And of course, these marketplaces, they have various operating models. There are consignment platforms such as ThredUp. Then there are platforms that facilitate and ease the peer-to-peer transactions such as Resale Collective. But then there's also non-facilitated social media groups, as well as these local offline stores, which also do exist in the market. So these marketplaces, they offer value for the consumers, these two kinds of consumers. For example, findability for buyers, but also easiness to sell for the customer sellers. For both consumers, they offer value in a form of trustworthy transactions or authentication services and so on. But in addition to these marketplaces and specialized platforms for resale, there are companies who are operating in the primary market, but they are now seeing the boom in the resale market, and they are searching various ways to be involved in this resale market of their own products. So yes, this sounds great idea when we are looking how much the resale market is increasing, but it is not always easy task for a company who is operating in the primary market. It requires, for example, reverse supply chain operations, meaning that for conventional fashion retailer, it requires new expertise in procurement of stock, sourcing used items, handling of used garments, pricing, selling, shipping, kind of new kind of operations. And that's why it is not unusual to hook up with someone who actually has already mastering in the resale logic and operations. This leads me to the question that I've been recently examined more precisely in this context. So I'm curious about what does the resale market, which has been growing a lot, what does this resale arena look like from company perspective, and more precisely, how are fashion companies involved in this growing resale? What are the strategies they are applying in order to be involved in this market? And that is my kind of overarching research question. And in order to capture this whole phenomena, I'm approaching this from qualitative case study perspective, and I have various kinds of data sources. I've been doing a lot of interviews, of course, understanding the consumer side, so interviews with customer sellers as well as buyers, but then there's also interviews from platforms, resale platforms who are operating in this field, as well as companies who are involved in the resale actions of their own products. In addition to interviews, I've been also doing or having this kind of ethnographical data sets, so field notes from ethnographical immersion for several months, then also ethnographical exploration, so that includes media and press presence that I've been examining. And the data collection as well as the analysis is still ongoing, and therefore next I will walk you through and discuss a bit about my preliminary findings and key issues that has been emerging so far. So let's start about how it basically looks like at this exact point. So when I was making sense of the whole second cycle of fashion goods, it became evident that there's a lot of things happening in this market, and especially in the post-consumption arena. So media presence, a number of magazines and newspaper articles, they have multiplied during the last few years. And companies are also offering various services, even department stores. They are active collaborating or building secondhand services or services through which customers could monetize their products in order to buy new items. There are a few examples here. For example, Zalando is having their resale services, as well as Nordstrom, Selfridge, and so on. And besides of these higher quality luxury artifacts, also recycling initiatives were obvious in the data collection. So, for example, in the fast fashion brands, there were, but these recycling initiatives, they were often conducted in partnership, and the Takeback maybe was organized as branded offering. And looking at the extensive number of services related to this post-consumption arena, the findings have been categorized even kind of or themed to the different groups in order to make sense of this kind of extensive data. And for example, Takeback the Takeback and sourcing of the previously used products, it is always the first step for a company to enter to secondary market. And here in the lower corner, you can see that there's, I found out that there's the companies who offer the take-back possibility for all kinds of garments in their own facilities. And then the disposer, the person who brings back the product, usually gains fusser or good conscious, and these collected products possibly are recycled, or it is not communicated more precisely what happens for this product after it is kind of donated or given back to the company. And yeah, there are some fast fashion companies as well as market brands who are involved in this kind of just take back position. Then there's this kind of take back in the middle. You can see there's take back organized for specific brands, and that's usually done in collaboration with intermediary. So the disposer maybe gains credit or voucher as well, or money for the sold product. So it's also usually done in collaboration, who then sells the product. Often retailers or department stores, some big brands are kind of mainly in this middle area, I would say. Then there's the third one, the highest there. So then the company organizes the take back or source their own products and then possibly sell them by themselves. And now I am basically focusing especially to these last two. So I will exclude now also the emerging new services, such as kind of take back in the form that they are using or doing upcycling practices. So I will focus now only to the resale market. So companies who are involved in order to sell the exact product as it is, how they are basically selling it further. Yes, so now I'm moving on to the more precise strategies or business models or business model extensions that can be pointed out from the large amount of data. So I have pointed out kind of three main strategies here that can be identified in the current resale market. And the first one that I want to say a few words about is the one that is kind of conducted or done in collaboration with resale player. So that means that the brand collaborates with resale platform and basically through that they redirect the resale to third-party website, and these resale actions are completely managed by a resale platform. So it is just done in collaboration, and brand is not involved in the resale activities. They have no inventory. The brand's control is very low. So they are just directing their own products to some platform who actually organize the resale. And this strategy looks like it's more or less preferred by luxury brands or high-end brands. The resale market is, in general, something that luxury brands are a bit hesitant to enter at this point. Of course, I understand it very well because there are stories about inauthentic luxury goods sold in the platforms. So it's not kind of leading to a right direction. Besides that, there's also this pre-use condition and customer experience related issues that might be recorded as the challenges. So these are so when a luxury company kind of is offering the resale services in a collaboration with some resale platform, they are usually kind of targeting to their existing luxury customers. So far, these luxury brands who are involved in resale market, they are actually not serving the second-hand customers, only their current customers. So here are a few examples. For example, Burberry offers this kind of they are doing collaboration with the Real, and they offer for the consigners, so the customer sellers, a tea party in their store in selected stores. Also, Stella McCartney, they give $100 credit for consigning customer to purchase new. And then there's also, for example, Alexander McQueen, who is partnering with Vestiaire Collective, and they take back their own products, which are then authenticated and sold in Vestiaire in brand approved program. So this is kind of the first strategy. Then the second strategy is branded secondhand services, which is basically built under the brand. So brand is involved in the process of facilitating, but the main work in the resale market is done mainly by and facilitated by intermediaries. So the third-party operators who basically offer, for example, white glove service for companies to be involved in the resale market. And this strategy relates more or less to the business model integration. So resale is integrated at some level to their offering, and that way the brand will get kind of medium control, I would say. And some examples here are these, as you can see in the slide, and the most common it seemed to be for this kind of large-scale global brands such as Patagonia or Levi's. Both are, for example, offering the service with the help of a company called Trove. Also, ThredUp offers similar kind of services for brands. And also other intermediaries are popping all the time to this resale market. There are, for example, the Archivest as well as Reflaunt, who are offering this kind of resale service for branded resale experience. So it's built under the company. Then finally, the third strategy that could have been pointed out in the existing resale market is the in-house secondhand service. So this requires the most resources from the company side, and yeah, it basically means that the company, everything related to resale market is basically built inside of the company. So the brand buys or incentivizes back their own products and then sell them. Of course, the control here is high, but it's also not the easiest task because the reverse supply chain is required. At this point, it seems that the most in-house players are smaller brands who actually can manage the volumes of their own products circulating in the market. So it requires a lot of different kind of work in order to operate the whole resale services in-house, and that's why I believe that that's why maybe the smaller brands are more common in the in-house services. For example, it requires the reverse supply chain in order to work. So sourcing, maintaining, caring, photographing, pricing, then doing everything basically again in terms of the products. Of course, it is not. It requires investment, time and resource wise, and that's why not many companies are currently involved, or it is not seen as profitable in business wise yet. But I am kind of confident that in the increasing material scarcity, this will be possibly the crucial offering when we are moving towards the circular economy. So a few examples that can be pointed out who are building the in-house resale. And there's for example, the cashmere knits selling Arela, who is offering also maintenance, repair, and resale services for their own. So they are actually building the whole full set of services for customer. Other example is Mulberry Pre-Loved. So they facilitate the secondhand transactions by themselves. So they usually buy the product back and take care, and then basically sell it again. And also Marimekko has launched a vintage pop-up with pre-loved selection. And yeah, of course, this is more or less example of this kind of short-term pop-up, but it is still fully facilitated in-house. Yes. So being involved in this resale market, it might, of course, bring various benefits for the brand. Of course, depending on the chosen strategy that I just reviewed very shortly and the level of integration, some perceived value or expected value can be spot. For example, as resale requires the active involvement from consumers, so both consumer sellers as well as buyers, I believe that there lies a great opportunity to engage customers and build brand loyalty if this resale offering is dealt in the right way. It also offers possibility to expand new target audiences and build even the brand community around secondhand market. Also the reputational value, it cannot be neglected. At this point, sustainability as well as authenticity questions are the burning ones, which could offer some benefits for companies or motivate them to take some resale activities as part of their offering. This also links to the brand management and control, which of course increases with the level of integration. For example, if brand is building in-house resale program, there is a good control over selection, the condition of the garment, the pricing, the quality issues, and the brand experience. Of course, also brand who is involved in the resale market, they may gain very much information for themselves about how the products are which products are circulating, what are the most loved ones, how the basically information that they can use when they are developing their items or the materials and so on. And yeah, of course, all of these are just possible avenues of value and the resale market that this resale market could bring for the brand, and it depends about the level of integration. But now moving on to the last burning question, how sustainable is secondhand? And answering to that question, I will take one step back and evaluate now the whole phenomena of resale market. So not only about these strategies that the companies could take, but the whole resale phenomena. So is secondhand sustainable? In a way, I have to say that yes, it is. Especially if we think that the product which has been bought as secondhand, when that is replacing the acquisition of new item. In that case, of course, there's smaller environmental impact. For example, when we are comparing the purchase of new product, the footprint of previously used goods, it is much smaller in terms of carbon emissions, energy demand, and water use, because there's no raw materials extracted. So it is suggested that the longer the lifespan of the garment is, the smaller the relative environmental impact of the garment will be. So, for example, it can be expected that with multiple users, there are also more usage times for product. So in that sense, we can think that yes, secondhand is sustainable. Keeping that in mind, we can also be very hopeful that maybe resale value of high quality artifacts that maybe will shape consumer preferences and behaviors. So, for example, resellable garments are preferred over very much disposal ones. So finally, the secondhand market and consumer mindset shift may also be translated in practice and practical behavior, meaning that when considering the possible resale market, consumers may take very good care of the product so that they enable the high resale value of the product in the future. But then, of course, things are never black and white. So there are some challenges that need to be acknowledged as well. before saying that yes, secondhand is only about very sustainable. So there are some aspects that I want to point out here as well. So the booming resale market, it has influenced also to the consumption behavior in general. For example, the easiness to dispose and sell, that may speed the cycle of consumption and purchase of new items. That might also lead to binge shopping or compulsive behavior, which are often kind of post-rationalized with environmental consciousness. And the product's uniqueness and kind of social pressure might even boost the speed of consumption. For example, increasing number of people in the queue who are queuing up for the unique product. It might lead to quick purchase decisions, and then because they have fear of missing the good bargain. It is also suggested that secondhand products may have even less usage times compared to brand new products. And this is maybe, I would say, that due to the quick decision making that is required when we are talking about unique secondhand products. Further, it is also helping that companies are offering these vouchers for consumers who dispose in order to motivate them to buy new. So finally, it needs to be acknowledged that there are also some embedded environmental impacts which are caused by the change of ownership. For example, transportation, additional laundering, sorting, storing. Secondhand is really environmentally neutral thing. Yes. Now I just want to draw some quick conclusions, and then I'm ready for questions. So I want to say that secondhand, in a sense, it is not salvation, but there's great hidden value and benefits from both sustainability perspective, but also there are some avenues for business value for companies. Firstly, thinking about the sustainability side, resale offerings enable the extended life cycle of the product, which itself, yes, it is valuable. But thinking the possible future opportunity that resale may open, it might be a bridge towards new circular business models even. In a way, integrating resale offerings, they could transfer the business model towards more sustainable by the company. That could enable even the shift the business offering towards this circular and service-based, and thus even make it possible in the future to scale down the production of new items and in a way substituting them with services in later stages of the supply chain. So it is noteworthy to point out that as long as the resale market is used to boost the sales of new items, then I think that it is not moving towards sustainable direction. Of course, having very forward-thinking mind and seeing only opportunities here, I believe that companies who are finding their way to circular processes, circulating the products, their own products, they are the ones who are showing the way in the future as well. So moving towards the circulation of their own products requires, of course, business model innovation, resources in order to make it profitable. So there are some avenues for business value that these engaged customers may bring. For example, by being involved in the resale market of their own products, the company may build this deeper and more valuable customer relationships with their customers, and they could learn from how customers are interacting with their products, and that way also build even more value for their current customers as well as reach new audiences. Yes, I've been talking a lot now, so I thank you for your time listening, and yes, that is everything that I want to say now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. This was absolutely fascinating. And I don't think I'm the only person, because in the chat it's also very busy, and it's absolutely fantastic to have everything here for you. I'm just going to start off with a couple of questions that have been posted, if you don't mind. So the first one is, for those resale companies, do they actually communicate to their customers that this is a more sustainable way of acquisition?
Well, very good question. And based on the media presence, what I've been reading, and how companies are usually kind of using it in their marketing communication, I have to say that it is usually linked very closely to sustainability pursuit. So that is kind of used in a way that it is marketed as sustainable direction. So yes.
Fantastic. And kind of like linking on from this, within your research, have you also managed to kind of look more at the technical side, because you investigated it from a company perspective, which is great, but have you also, for example, like looked at algorithms and how companies might suggest how much a piece of clothing should be in a resale market?
No, I haven't been looking from the algorithm side or digital side. So my current data set that I am having, I have kind of more ethnographical collection. So basically, I have been closely observing about companies who have been building the resale offering in-house, and that is kind of from where I basically have collected the most data, as well as looking the ethnographical, like how companies and how media is discussing about resale. But what all the kind of the big data, the companies, the platforms that I've been interviewing who are involved in this resale arena, they are not very keen to share close information for researcher either, because these startups and platforms, their biggest competitive advantage is the data, I have to say. So there's a lot data about what products are this kind of circulating at what price, and they are kind of these new emerging startups who are offering this kind of resale services for brands. They are actually, I have to say, they are data companies. So they have all the information what is happening in this field. But yeah. So as a researcher, I just kind of get the understanding that yes, we have all the data, and we are basically positioned as data company who can then tell a lot of information for the company and help them to organize and operationalize the whole resale. But there's that's the field is super interesting, because that's very closely related to data as well.
It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, like I thought how you classified them as well, with like the Takeback Schemes. So when you sort of like think what a challenge with it, I'm pretty sure like a lot of people have read about different scandals as well that might have happened in the past, and how companies have overcome this. And now with their own Takeback Scheme and also like the resale, or if they employ a company, is absolutely fascinating. Olga also says, thank you very much for a great presentation. And her question was, what affects the choice of those resale strategies?
Well, I'm now in a phase where I have kind of identified these main strategies here. And I also want to point out that there are companies who are kind of mixing and matching. So it's not only like straightforward, kind of pick and choose one. But one of the key things is most likely the resources that the company has, because not many companies have resources to build it in-house, for example, in terms of kind of time, money, people who could operate it, or kind of understanding about the reverse supply chain, and start kind of sourcing your own products. So it is at this point, I see, before collecting even more data, I see that it's very much depending on what kind of resources they have. And as I pointed out, that possibly many luxury companies are choosing the kind of the partnership or collaboration. In a way, I think that is it is not maybe about the resources, the challenges here, but it is more hesitant due to this kind of negative negative things that have related to, for example, counterfeits in the market, or they are not sure how to kind of create the experience when it's kind of previously used item. It is not brand new, so the product itself has this kind of own story. It is not only about the brand story, but it has its kind of brand story with the kind of previously used condition and things like that. So it's not only about the resources, but also what are the kind of, what company would like to gain through the resale, offering this resale service. So yeah, that I see that it is a mix of resources, available resources, but in a way also the aims and pursuits that a company feel that resale could offer for them. And I am, as a researcher, of course, I'm very optimistic that circulating your products, it is of course not like a circular economy, but it is kind of first round of this kind of the product which is high quality, made of high quality materials and well manufactured. I think that kind of products might have multiple users, many more usage times, and that way I see that it is somehow also more sustainable in a way, instead of just keeping the products at home in a closet, not using them. So yeah, it's kind of maybe even step towards collaborative consumption in a way.
Fantastic. It's really fascinating to see. So again, it's also a little bit of a strategic consideration, probably. Like as you said, if there's no resources there, you cannot have this. On the other hand, as you already highlighted, it's probably also a little bit challenging sometimes, especially like when you talk about luxury and they've got a certain brand image that they need to uphold. So if they can't be 100% sure of what the quality actually is that they get back.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I see that there's a huge value for like luxury brands that now they are kind of just doing this kind of collaborating with platforms mainly. But then, for example, Miu Miu is kind of taking back their own products and kind of upcycling them. So basically they are creating something new from their own old. So that are kind of these new models that these companies could kind of somehow tap into the resale, but it's not kind of resale, it is more kind of upcycling, but kind of position yourself in the whole kind of consumption cycle, kind of moving forward from just being the company who sells the product once, but being involved in the later stages and being involved with the customer in a way. I see there huge opportunity thinking about kind of the material scarcity possibly in the future. So they have produced already something, so why not take care of the material and the product in the later stages as well.
Fantastic. And you've got a really fantastic comment from Jurek as well. So thank you very much for this. Yes, we did have a second speaker, Thomas. Unfortunately, he can't be here today. And he's looking, as Jurek pointed out, he is looking at less about the premium market. And he's done a lot of work and a big job in Poland, also looking at markets that are not luxury. Have you ever considered also like researching something in the non-luxury market, or is it not as big? Is it?
Yes. Well, I basically started from the luxury and kind of high-end products with the kind of high quality, because I basically started from there. But now I have to say that my research is kind of a little bit like expanding. So not all the companies that I'm doing research about, it's not only about the luxury companies, but more I'm kind of staying in the fashion and garment, like textile industry. That is more my kind of the biggest interest area. But yes, I am moving to other companies as well. So thinking, for example, like these Patagonia and Levi's and these kind of larger scale global brands. So yes, I see that this is not only about the luxury, high quality luxury products. So yes, I believe I just need to collect even more data. But yeah.
Fantastic. And there's like now some really interesting topics, I think, coming up in the questions. The first one is about what type of clothes or accessories do sell the fastest or the slowest? Have you managed to collect any data about that?
I don't have a right answer for that, but the answer is no, that I don't unfortunately have data for that. But what I'm the most what I've been kind of mostly studying is kind of the accessories, for example, like handbags or this kind of durable artifacts which are not kind of size related, because when we are thinking about garments or shoes or mainly garments and shoes, there's always this kind of the size issue or sizing. You need to find the perfect size in your size with specific condition and with good price, so then you are basically buying it. But when we are thinking, for example, handbags or kind of other accessories which are not size related, then it's basically somehow the audience is kind of larger for them. But I'm not saying that they are maybe selling better, because I don't unfortunately have the data about that, but they have kind of larger audience because it is not only specific size. And then thinking about, for example, handbags, there's usually the fashion changes slower in a way, so they are maybe more durable. So if you, well, now I'm talking mostly about like luxury handbags, for example. So the fashion doesn't change that quickly, maybe. So then they kind of can be available for longer if there's no people who kind of wants to buy that specific time. But thinking, for example, fashion garments with specific size, then you just need to, it's kind of quick cycle, because fashionable items, then they need to be sold very quickly in the resale market in order for them to be desirable, and then it needs to be the right size and so on. So no, I don't have any right answer which are selling the best. But that's why I like a lot studying this kind of products which are not size related.
Fantastic. And this is also like a very fascinating question that Jurek has posted about. Are there any items that are forbidden? So, for example, like you already mentioned shoes, that they can be sold. But there always seems to be like this thing with the undergarments. So generally that we can't really say on anything. But shoes, for example, like you would say, is there any, like, have you any noticed in any of your companies that there's certain items that are just not sold, and or have they made any comments about why we wouldn't resale any items?
That's a good question. Good question. But yeah, of course, not all items are good for resale. Well, now I come back to the kind of why I'm maybe doing the research in the in the field of luxury, or this kind of long-lasting, kind of a little bit like timeless pieces, because they are often kind of selling these pieces which are not kind of now I'm trying to figure out which could be kind of non-sellable. Maybe the under garments or kind of underwear, or of course the thing is that maybe also this kind of clothes which are very kind of delicate, the material, they are challenging, but that also results that maybe they don't have many like not multiple users. So there's kind of 1 or 2 users, and then the material is not, you cannot wash it too many times, or dry clean it too many times, or things like that, which are then after all, they are not for very resaleable, I would say. So it's also, that's why I think the high quality, the material decisions, they kind of course influence what could be sold. But yeah, no, I haven't been doing that much research with the companies who are having items that are not good for resale, or I haven't faced any of these fashion related challenges here.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? Because like certain things, I mean, like you buy them firsthand, but then in the secondhand market they will never come up. So
and also to add that, because then like in terms of the luxury brands, it was also interesting. We did research with Marie-Cécile Sevelon and Lindsay Carey about luxury consumers who dispose and who wants to sell. And in terms of luxury goods, it is also interesting because it's somehow much more maybe emotional investment, and how people then, why do they then decide to sell the product? And there are different practices and how you kind of erase the meanings from that, or you have your past life with that product and you don't want to see that product anymore because you have kind of associated so many things to that specific product. And then the selling process is something that you are just selling the product. You are not kind of selling that kind of luxury item, because you kind of constructed your luxury through the exclusive service experience at the when you were buying it as first hand. So yes, luxury goods are also sold further, although they might be very kind of intimate somehow also, but there's this kind of different practices how then consumer who decides to sell the product, they are walking these kind of different steps to erase the meanings from the product before selling it.
Fantastic. It's so interesting. We had another question about what companies do you think are currently the strongest in terms of resale? Is there anybody who stands out?
In terms of, do you mean like in terms of the product categories, or just some company who kind of do it well?
Yeah, just companies that do it particularly well.
I don't maybe want to name any one company or the companies, but I believe that there are now many kind of emerging new companies who are actually building their whole business in a way that their products are kind of resellable and they are involved in the different stages of the consumption cycle. So for this kind of older existing companies, when you start integrating the resale market, it starts kind of further away. Then you kind of start taking small kind of additional services, or first you start collaborating with someone and then you start taking the resale activities inside, but then your focus is in the primary market. But then these new emerging smaller companies, their whole business model is built in a way that the resale is just kind of, they just kind of aim to close the loop. So they are selling firsthand, but then they kind of acknowledge that we want to take care of, we believe in our item so much that we want to take care of our item after the first consumer has already kind of used it and want to dispose it, because they basically want to create, for example, the branded experience for the next user, and then they are kind of working in different kind of levels. So they have different kind of customers. They have the first hands and then the second hand customers. And I would say that these smaller companies are more agile, of course, and they of course have the agility comes from because it's more manageable, because they don't have this enormous number of the items that they need to kind of create. So how to then scale this up in a way that you could manage, this is maybe the future question. But I see that these smaller companies who kind of build their whole business in a way that the resale is part of their offering, they are mainly, I would say, I basically look up to these. And then maybe the bigger companies, existing companies who start their journey with the resale, they could maybe have some learnings from the smaller agile companies as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, very Fantastic. Good question.
We've had another really interesting one from Rebecca about cultures and geography, which is absolutely fascinating. Do you think there's certain cultures and or geographic regions where resale might work better than in others?
Yes, there are. This is also one big question where I would like to do even more research about. And yeah, I am searching for collaborating partners from different countries for this, because I have realized that this secondhand is very. Yeah, I'm from Finland, and I'm like in Nordic countries. This is kind of very. It is booming a lot. Of course, there are these global platforms like Vestir and Real. So you can see that it's not like this in specific countries, but we have much more kind of in general the whole country, such as Finland. We have very positive attitude towards the resale. So it's not designed for being poor. And that's changing the whole aspects. But then, for example, in Asian countries, I think this will be changing. But I'm not now saying, because I haven't been doing enough research here, but there has been some challenges when thinking that you are using someone's old. So if there's kind of the person whose old artifact you are using, there might kind of things will be translated to you if you kind of buy it as kind of pre-used. So then there's this kind of negative attitudes towards the old items. And then, for example, when we were doing with Marie-Cécile and Lindsay the research, and we collected data from UK, Finland, and France, we realized that the reasons or the countries here were also very different. So I think it was. Now I'm just trying to remember, but I think it was in a way that, like in France, it was in a way that in south people were kind of selling south of France, and in the north of France they were like more like buying. So inside of the country there were also kind of, when you looked at Vestiers, like where in France people were mostly like the biggest sellers were in some specific area, and then the buyers were kind of in different area of the country. So these are the data points that I'm referring to now you asked in the first question, that there's a lot of data that we could basically understand if these platforms would kind of open their data, but of course that's their competitive advantage as well. But yeah, so different countries have of course different there's these cultural issues, but then there's also attitude towards the kind of buying, especially about buying someone's old. Maybe the selling part is not that kind of crucial, but kind of when you are buying someone's old. So I see that in Nordic countries it is much more fine, it is great, it is okay and acceptable, but then in some countries it is not that acceptable, maybe because of cultural reasons.
It's just so interesting. It's also interesting what you just said with the almost like north-south divide in countries itself, like where they're actually selling and where they're also buying, which I guess also links quite nicely to your sustainability debate and looking at how big the carbon footprint is after.
Yes, and then in terms of these, there are of course some challenges in this kind of platforms because, for example, when we are talking about like the biggest advantage with, for example, Vestiaire is that the authentication service and kind of the trustworthiness that they can offer for customer. But when we are kind of thinking only about, for example, the sustainability issue and not look at about this. So if I am, for example, selling through Vestiaire, I ship it first to the France, and then if the buyer is in Finland or in other country, it will then be shipped kind of, there's two, I'm not shipping it usually directly to the customer. So in order to authenticate the product, which is one of the key things that they offer, which is great because that is one of the struggles the kind of luxurious brands have in the resale market. There's kind of, it's positive thing, but if we only look at the sustainability issues, then of course we need to acknowledge also that maybe there are some challenges that could be kind of maybe offer this kind of authentication services in different countries. So yeah,
it's just really fascinating, isn't it? Like the whole sort of like threat about the counterfeit products and how this can devalue a brand massively, so that you're almost having to go through those platforms in order to make the market work.
Yes, and that's why I see that somehow it would be valuable for companies to be involved to authenticate their own products. So kind of if we are thinking also like fighting against counterfeiting, being involved, kind of you kind of know your own products, you kind of track your own. If we are thinking about luxury, then you basically know what products are yours, what have been sold by your own stores. So basically being involved in at least in the authentication service part, somehow that would maybe help to find this kind of little bit more control over what is in the resale market. So that's why I see that I understand that that's also the resource issue. Kind of if you now need to start authenticating your old sold products, and then thinking, for example, these like finding very old vintage Dior with different sizing in different countries. You might have different sizing issues. There are different challenges why luxury companies are not that keen to kind of be involved, because then they need to face their old items, that the sizing, the style, kind of there's many things that might have been changed. And then kind of you cannot just trust that when you are buying this specific brand, maybe the sizing in different countries different, and then you kind of need to say that yes, remind that this is different sizing. And there's a lot of this kind of resource issues, why I also understand why it is challenging, and that's why it is easier to be only in the first hand and primary market and not kind of take all your history with you kind of all the time.
It's fantastic. This also links quite nicely to actually what Daria has said. So I guess with the blockchain, and that, for example, companies like Bottega Veneta are using blockchain technology now to authenticate their products, which is great that it's been introduced. So this might make it a lot easier to then, like, for the resale market. But I guess because in the past we unfortunately didn't have it, it's good to sort of like start off with it, and potentially companies can get more involved with it as well.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that kind of the future technologies will kind of change a lot the whole resale market as well. So yeah, blockchain would be one way of kind of tracing your own, and that would absolutely help in the resale market as well.
And there's just one more question, which I guess, like, I mean, you've looked from a company perspective, but I'm pretty sure you've also done interviews or research with consumers before. Do you think, like, especially with, let's call them like more sensitive items, so if you've got something like fur, and obviously that's quite contested, and it has been contested for quite a while, do you think there's almost like a resistance in the resale market, or does that not come through as much?
Like, for example, buying fur as secondhand. Yeah, well, in terms of like in the customer or consumer interviews, like the secondhand usually, or kind of it when it is not bought as brand new, then you basically let yourself easier to buy this kind of items that you maybe wouldn't buy as first hand, because for example the fur or like leather or things like that, then you kind of maybe explain to yourself, or this is how I kind of in the interviews the customers they have been kind of pointing out how they kind of post rationalize that they wouldn't be buying this as brand new, but the animal is not killed because of me, but I am just kind of second or third or fourth owner of this, so this is kind of more okay to buy. So yeah, some items that's like it feels that in secondary market you are, of course, you are already kind of maybe following your own values in a way, because you are not buying brand new, and in that case it is of course easier then to buy. But at the same time, the challenge is that these customers usually then also point out that when they are buying a secondhand, for example fur, they usually always point out that very loudly in a way. So because of course if we think that you buy a fur jacket as secondhand and then you are using it in walking in the street, no one knows have you bought it first hand or second hand. So in that sense, these customers who maybe buy then items that they wouldn't maybe buy as first hand, they are usually very explicitly bringing up that they have bought it as second hand. So they basically want to find acceptance for their purchase if they are buying these products which they wouldn't maybe buy as first hand.
It's kind of fascinating, isn't it? There's like loads of different products that, for example, like it was pointed out that Oxfam, for example, like prohibits reselling products such as fur, which is quite fascinating in a way that there's companies obviously that say, well, we don't want to be associated with it. We don't want to be part of this resale market. On the other hand, from a consumer perspective, as you explained, because the product is already out there, it has already been sold once. So now if you're selling it for a second, third, fourth time, there's this whole argument, shouldn't that be, like promoted in a way that it's used for longer, and at least, like it's not going to waste, or like nothing happens with that specific garment. It's a very interesting debate.
That's true. And then at the same time, I also want to point out that the challenge is that the market, after all, it doesn't change unless the primary market changes. So that's why, like, thinking about these items which are not very kind of ethical or acceptable. So although the secondhand market, it might be okay, but then the production in the primary markets needs to kind of stop or kind of diminish in order the secondary market it's kind of lagging behind. But then kind of course, then for example, it might be that if the fur is not used anymore, then in the tens of years it is hard to find in secondary market as well. But then it basically also change when there's changes in the primary market. It takes time when it translates in the secondary market, and then after all these items in the secondary market, if they are not produced, the new items are not produced anymore, then the secondary market might kind of, their value might be increasing. So then there's like different kind of dynamics again that we are then the change happens when the primary market actually decides to do something and behaves accordingly. But then it will have effect also on the secondary market, but after a while.
There's also something that's really fascinating that you mentioned, because you're talking about the secondary market rather than the second-hand market, which is quite fascinating, because obviously something might be second-hand, but it might also be third-hand, fourth-hand, fifth-hand. It's quite interesting with the terminology and how this has actually been used and what we understand with it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of different terms that I use. Like pre-loved is used a lot, but it is more like it's like marketing term, I would say. The pre-loved brings up the positive side, and then the second hand sounds like there's only like earlier like primary first owner, and then now I'm second hand, but there might be multiple different owners before you are buying it. So that's why I like talking about like resale market or secondary market, because it's different market itself, and there might be many different owners already.
Fantastic. And one of the other things, like I'm just really curious about this, because you mentioned about Miu Miu, where they almost like collect all of their stuff back and also upcycling it and then reselling it, which I think is a really fascinating concept in terms of not only being part of the resale market, but also again creating something that is first hand, but at the same time it's been pre-loved.
Yeah, and that is something that I really would like to study even more, because that's kind of, upcycling is again kind of its own, it's kind of, it is its own trait, or kind of, it's not only in the resale market, because it becomes kind of completely new product in a way, although the materials or the item might be consisted of the materials that are already kind of previously used, but the whole item becomes completely new. So the upcycling, it is kind of super inspiring and interesting arena that I believe that should be researched even more. And that is something that I believe that, for example, luxury companies could kind of do in a way. So yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. Please also do post more questions if you've got any other questions for Linda as well. One question will probably be quite interesting. I mean, you already pointed out sort of like what your future research areas are, but is there any other projects that you're quite interested in at the moment with resale?
I see the brand, like the brand perspective, especially like how these strategies could be implemented. But also I am super interested in the data side, like what are all the information, like the data and information side behind the whole resale market, because looking at the startups and small new emerging companies, they are more or less like positioning themselves as data companies. So kind of also the transition here, it's not anymore kind of, you are not just because you are not producing, you are kind of you have different role as company when you are kind of you are managing the operations, and that kind of brings you all kinds of new data points. So yeah, these kind of the company perspective is interesting. Of course, I am also interested in the consumer side. I cannot kind of just change it, because it is somewhere where I have begun my researcher journey. So I would like to do research more like in global level. So like I pointed out, like doing this kind of research collaboration with the different researchers from different countries who are interested in the resale field. So kind of doing some kind of collaborative, collect data from different countries and kind of build this kind of bigger project about the resale as a global phenomena, and how it's kind of having different shapes. And yeah, the upcycling. But yeah, I usually want to somehow include the sustainability discussions in my research. So there's this kind of sustainability part, which is why I always I link the resale, I link closely to sustainability somehow, or find the challenges there. But in my future research, I also want to kind of include the sustainability aspect, at least somehow, in the resale.
I actually thought it was so nicely done with the end of your presentation where you said, is it actually sustainable or not? And then like highlighting both areas, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. It's just such a nice way to acknowledging as well, obviously, that there's always challenges with every single model that we have in the market as well.
Yeah, it is never like, there's always different shades. Nothing is never like black and white. So that's why I think that there are a lot of opportunities from sustainability side, kind of using it as a stepping stone towards like collaborative consumption. Like consumers are not seeing themselves as the last consumers of the artifact. So maybe that the whole booming resale market is just a step before just renting everything, because consumers still want to possess and own the product, and that happens through the resale and secondhand. But then in the next phase, maybe it is just kind of collaborative, that then not these items that you used to be buying and selling and being through secondhand stuff, then maybe that will be moving towards renting. So that's also kind of new kind of shift and change that I believe that the resale could kind of enable somehow.
It is quite fascinating, especially thinking about renting, because obviously like you pay a fee and there's like one party more or less like where you can also have the exchange with if it's from an individual that is renting. But I guess there's also this worth of some of these items, because looking at how much some of the resale items sell for is probably also quite interesting. Some of them probably are not growing as much in kind of like how much they're worth in monetary terms, whilst others, especially like the vintage items now, can sell probably for quite a high price as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It is kind of the vintage. Also, I want to say that the vintage part is something that I believe that somehow the luxury companies could be, if they don't want to be this kind of secondary market, they could somehow be involved this kind of vintage in-house part. So kind of building their own archive by sourcing back their own vintage pieces, and then of course, for example, offering this selection of vintage pieces for this their best VIP services. You know, there's different ways these the vintage could be incorporated for luxury companies, that I see a lot of value.
Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. I think I probably asked you like quite a lot of questions and you had to talk quite a lot. I just wanted to say thank you so much for an absolutely amazing presentation and your time, and obviously like answering all those questions. And obviously for everybody who participated, thank you so much for your fantastic questions. It's really great just to see so many different questions being asked and so much interest in your research topic as well, which is clearly very current, which is absolutely brilliant. And it might be quite good for everybody if you're still having a little bit of a coffee break before the next session. I'm just going to say thank you very much for all of your time, and I hope you enjoyed the session, and thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you, and thank you for very good questions, Claudia, and everyone who joined with your questions in the audience. And yeah, I am happy to answer more questions. If you have, you can reach me by email. So thank you very much for joining this session. It was my pleasure being involved.